Hello everyone. For those of you that are new here, I go by the name Starry Night Oracle on Instagram and YouTube. I'm an intuitive, purpose-based traditional astrologer, and I'm here to help you understand what's going on within the cosmos so that you can prepare for what's to come. Now, I thought for today's video we would cover Venus finally going direct in the sign Leo. This happened on September 3rd at 9:20 p.m. Although she has gone direct, we're still living in retrograde city, and it's just a shit show, for lack of a better word. So I thought that what we would cover is what Venus retrograde was and recap that, and then sort of look at everything as we move forward. So what are retrogrades? Well, retrogrades are technically optical illusions where a celestial body, and in this case it was the planet Venus, appears to go backwards in orbit from the perspective on Earth. Now, it is worth noting that Venus retrogrades every 18 months, and the retrogrades last for between 6 weeks or 40 to 43 days. Now, as for the symbolism of Venus retrograde, generally speaking, retrogrades are times where we go inwards, where we reflect, review, redefine, reevaluate, and reconnect, so that when the celestial body, in this case Venus, goes direct, we have clarity as to how we're going to move forward in our lives. Now, with Venus, what we're looking at is matters of the heart, our desire for connection, our aesthetic sensibilities, and the things that we find visually pleasing, our capacity to experience joy and pleasure, our attitude towards money, our spending habits, and our material possessions. Now, with Venus retrograde in Leo, we're dealing with all matters of the heart and things to do with love, because Venus has to do with love. It can also be the way that we feel within our own skin and our appearance and our confidence in relationships, how we relate to others, our confidence when it comes to money and living from a heart-centered space. Now, as for the dates, because retrogrades are kind of interesting, so they sort of work in like a little zigzag pattern. So the planet hits the degree at which it's going to come back to during the retrograde, and the period that it takes to get to where it's going to retrograde from is called the pre-shadow. So this period here, where it went from 12 degrees until it went to 28 degrees, which was where Venus retrograded, was the pre-shadow. And so that can be a challenging time for us as well, but it is worth paying attention to those dates, because if there was something going on in your life from June 19th until July 22nd or 23rd, depending on where you're in the world, that's sort of the pre-shadow period. So then we hit the 22nd or 23rd, where Venus hit 28 degrees. So she hit 28 degrees, and then that was where she retrograded. And now she went back to 12 degrees, and that's the actual retrograde. So she went forward to 28, and then she went back doing the actual retrograde. Now, on September 3rd or 4th, again, depending on where you are in the world, she went direct. And so now she's recovering degrees that she covered from June 19th until July 22nd or 23rd. So now we're going back over that area. And it's kind of interesting because Venus hits that 28th degree. She gets basically to the end of Leo, and that's the closure of her entire retrograde phase, from the pre-shadow to the retrograde to the post-shadow. And then she leaves on October 7th, and then it's October 8th or 9th, I believe, that she moves into Virgo. So we're just getting this like tail end of Venus in Leo. And so again, we're going over parts of the past to figure out sort of where we stand with things. Now that that's said and done, it's worth looking at some of the aspects that were on the actual day that Venus went direct, which was September 3rd or 4th, depending on where you are in the world, as far as what's going on with the rest of the celestial bodies, because everything plays a part when it comes to the impact that something has. And I know that a lot of people just think that, oh, she went direct and so that's all there is. But no, because there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not really paying attention to or that we're not aware of. And so everybody just hears, oh, Venus went direct. Great. Yes, but there's impact of that. And I'm going to see if I can find everything for you. I actually had a list of all of this and then I accidentally threw it out. Thank you, Mercury retrograde. I appreciate you. First and foremost, we have the North Node in Eris sitting at 25 degrees of Aries, and we have the South Node in Ceres sitting at 25 degrees of Libra, sitting in opposite to each other. So with opposites, there is this push and pull, this tension that happens as we're being pulled in different directions. So Ceres is the goddess of nurturance. She's very motherly, and she is where we find that comfort. And so being with the South Node in Libra, it might have been very hard for us to find any semblance of balance or feeling nurtured or desiring nurtured around the time that Venus went direct. Because instead, we're going to look at where the North Node is with Eris. And so the North Node is what we're supposed to move towards. It's the destiny that we're supposed to aim for. The actions that we take in this lifetime to help us get ahead. The South Node is what we're supposed to leave behind. And so this is a time with Eris. And I know this isn't going to sound very nice, but it is what it is. A lot of us are going to need to move away from needing to be coddled or nurtured or have somebody make us feel better, because we're dealing with Eris, and Eris is the sister of Mars or Aries, and so she is one of the goddesses of war. And so Eris with the North Node is we're needing to be taking care of ourselves and not looking for somebody else to take care of us. And it's interesting because although they're not necessarily making an exact aspect to Venus having gone direct, this is very much, with Venus being in Leo, about us finding our own self-confidence to move forward and do the things that we need to do, and not looking for somebody else to nurture us. And I don't want to say save us, but not looking to somebody else to nurture us, to make us feel better, because we're supposed to be standing in our power. Separate from that, again, it's not exact, but we do have sextile between Pluto at 28 degrees of Capricorn in retrograde motion and Neptune in 26 degrees of Pisces in retrograde motion. It's a 2-degree orb, but I'm still going to say that it has a very big impact. Pluto is the planet of transformation and rebirth and just demolishing everything that was. And with Capricorn, it's very traditional sign. So again, this is us moving out of traditional ways of doing things because they are outdated and no longer work for our highest good. And anything that doesn't serve our highest good with Pluto and Capricorn is going to be torn down. Now it's making this, again, sextile over to Neptune retrograde and Pisces, and that's all about our dreams. It can be illusions, it can be delusions, it can be confusion, but it can also be us moving into a space of figuring out what our biggest dreams are, the lives that we want to live. And there's a supporting aspect between these two, because as we start to live into our dreams and figure out what it is that we really desire, there is Pluto in the background tearing down what no longer works. So anything that is leaving your life while Pluto is retrograde in Capricorn, let it go. Anything that doesn't feel good to you anymore, let it go. Anything that doesn't serve your highest good, let it go. And I'm not saying that it's easy, because there's always a struggle when it comes to Pluto retrograde and it comes to us having things leave our lives. Grief isn't just for relationships. Grief is also the loss of opportunities, the loss of friendships, the loss of dreams that we had. Again, we're dealing with Neptune, which is our dreams. But there's a supportive aspect here, because the more that we let go of what no longer works, and the more that we lean into building a life that we truly love, again, Venus and Leo, building a life that we truly love, where we're proud of who we are and proud of what we do, and we feel good in ourselves, and we're living from a heart-centered place, the more that these things falling away will hurt a little bit less. And again, it's worth noting that Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So again, it very much does relate to where are we, what do we want? If we're living from a heart-centered place, how do we make our dreams come true? What do we truly desire? At the same time, we have Mercury, 15 degrees of Virgo, making a trine over to Jupiter at 15 degrees of Taurus. It's kind of interesting that while this is going on with Pluto and Neptune, and Venus is finally going direct, that we also have the way that we think helping us figure out what we want so that we can expand. Again, Jupiter has to deal with expansion. Where can we grow into? And Taurus deals with the 3D. It's an earth sign. It's the first earth sign, and it has to do with building our foundations. And so how can we expand into our 3D reality and figuring all of that out? Now, Mercury in Virgo is about perfecting things, the little steps, organizing, being rational, being practical, and figuring all of this out so that we can expand in the best way so that we're building a strong foundation for our future. And at the same time, we have Icarus in Sagittarius at 23 degrees, making a quincunx or an inconjunction to Uranus retrograde in Taurus. This is very much where we want change in our lives. We're tired of the same old status quo. We want things to shift. Uranus in Taurus retrograde is, I want my 3D reality to shift, but I don't know how to make that happen. I don't know what needs to change. And I just wish something would change, but it's not changing. And with an inconjunction, which is basically like 5 signs apart, neither of them really understands each other. And so when it comes to Venus in this aspect, having gone forward, she's making a trine over to Icarus and Sagittarius and a square over to Uranus and Taurus. So for us having Venus go direct during all of this, what risks do I need to take in order for things to change? But am I really ready for that change? I don't know what's going to happen if I make these changes. I don't know what's going to change in my life and how that's going to affect me in the long term and if it's really going to be what I want. And so what do I do? And so there's this discomfort that happens between Venus and Uranus. And then there's this, but I really want for things to change, and so I need to do something differently and maybe take some risks. And so with Venus going direct, it's taking safe risks. So Mars at 4 degrees of Libra, Saturn at 3 degrees of Pisces, we have another in conjunction or quincunx between 2 major players in the game. So again, it's this moving from a space of balance, moving from a space where we're not just being aggressive and moving into it, but taking the time to find our balance before we take action. And then Saturn in Pisces is feeling really held back from our dreams. And so there's this struggle that happens there as well between how do I get to where I want to go when I'm feeling stuck? How do I make my dreams, Neptune and Pisces, how do I make my dreams a reality? And how do I do this when I feel like I can't make any changes and I can't move forward? I can't do anything. At the end of the day, with all of the retrogrades that are going on, and then with everything that was happening behind the scenes, it's us coming out of a Venus retrograde where we want things in our lives to be different and we're yearning for something more and we want to be living lives that we absolutely love. And a shift needs to happen in order for us to get to where we want to go, but we don't know how to do that. And so a lot of people in their lives right now are feeling very stuck. So if it feels right off the bat like it's not necessarily an easy breezy, direct motion after September 3rd. Just know that you're not alone in it, that a lot of us are going through the same thing in different ways in our lives, and that part of that is just the process of us going through this post-shadow phase, again, going up to the 28th degree, which will be around October 7th, which is when we're out of post-shadow, and we're just figuring out, is this really what I want? And how do I get to where I really want? Am I happy? And if I'm not happy, then what do I need to do to be happy? And again, I'm going to say, all of us are going through this. We are rethinking, reevaluating, going over everything again to reconnect with ourselves so that we can build lives that we absolutely love living. So now that that's said and done, I'm going to take you guys on Venus's journey through her post-shadow phase. And that goes from September 3rd until October 7th. And I'm doing this to help you prepare for what's to come. Now, I don't think that there's anything bad coming. In fact, I think it'll be a fairly easy post-shadow. But when we know what's coming, it makes it that much easier for us to move through the energies that are at play, knowing that that's all that it is and that's why it's all happening. So we are now going to jump to Time Nomad, which is one of my absolute favorite apps for astrology, just because I can show you guys and you can kind of follow along with me. Now, rather than using a picture, which was what I did for the previous full moon in Pisces video, I've left the app open so that we can chart through it together. And if need be, I'm going to take some screenshots and then show you guys exactly what's going on and sort of highlight everything for you so that you can understand and see what's going on. So this was September 3rd, as we can all see, and I'm going to move forward and show you starting around September 9th. So on September 9th, we see Juno meeting with Venus. Now, because Venus and Juno will be traveling together in such close proximity until Venus leaves post-shadow anyways, it's worth looking at the symbolism of these two celestial bodies and the mythology that's behind them, because I think that they're going to play a really big part in our Venus direct and what we're going to be experiencing between now and October 7th. Now, it is worth noting that there were only two Olympus goddesses that were legally married, and that is Juno and Venus. Now, Juno took her wedding vows very seriously, whereas Venus did not. So as for Venus, Venus is known as the goddess of love. She's the embodiment of divine feminine energy. She was beautiful, and as such, she was desired by gods and mortals alike. However, she was stuck in a loveless marriage to Vulcan, and she didn't want to sacrifice her pleasure or her desires, so she had a long, passionate affair with Mars, the god of war. She also had a lot of other affairs, but that was her primary affair, was with him, because that was who she was in love with. And so when we look at Venus, we're dealing with issues of what we desire, what we value, how we experience pleasure, the desire to love and be loved, not settling for something that we don't want, what and who we like or don't like, as per she liked Mars, she did not like Vulcan, and the desire for connection and satisfaction. Now, looking at Juno, she was married to Jupiter. He was the king of the gods, and as such, she became the queen of the gods. Now, with regard to her marriage, the story goes that Jupiter was a philanderer, and he had a lot of affairs with mortals and other goddesses. Now, Juno was mad with jealousy and rage, and so she plotted revenge, but not on Jupiter. Instead, she went after his lovers while remaining faithful and loyal to him, and the wedding vows that they took. And in turn, taking on the role of the good wife that tolerates bullshit but doesn't stray. So she stayed in that relationship. So when we look at Juno's symbolism, we're dealing with commitment, what we're willing to sacrifice of ourselves or our pride to remain in commitment, to whom and what we're willing to commit and why, remaining true to the promises that we made or the vows that we took, even when we're unhappy, as well as what we are or aren't willing to tolerate, especially when it comes to our partnerships or the connections in our lives and any attachment wounds that we carry. Now, again, I'm mentioning this because we're coming out of a retrograde period, and these two celestial bodies will remain within 1 degree of each other until Venus is out of her post-shadow retrograde phase. So it feels like a lot of this period in time is going to be about finding clarity or understanding what we want and need in a serious partnership, figuring out if the commitments that we're in are truly serving us, or if it's time we step away so that we can find fulfillment elsewhere. It can also be a space of seeing whether we're staying where we are out of habit, or if it's because we truly want to be there. Again, at the end of the day, we're dealing with Venus direct in Leo, and she's being joined by Juno. So this is very much about finding confidence, inner strength, courage, and self-love to make empowered choices that serve our highest good for the highest good of all. This is, I think, a major thing that we're going to be dealing with as we move through Venus's post-shadow phase as she goes direct. And I'm just going to do a really quick spin forward so that you guys can see, if you keep your eyes where Venus and Juno are, they stay together, basically within a degree. And at one point, Juno overtakes Venus. And so I think that this is important as well, because I think that's going to be a period of time where we're really looking at commitment, where we're really looking at, what am I committed to? Do I want to be committed to this? Do I enjoy being committed to this? And it can even be the ways that we make money. It can be our appearance. It can be to relationships. It can be to partnerships. It can be to things in our lives that are like our material possessions, things that we are hanging on to and are committed to, and figuring out if we really want to be committed to those things. Because do they make me happy? Does this thing that's in my life make me happy? And if it doesn't, am I willing to stay here and tolerate being unhappy just so that I can have this thing in my life? So again, we're just going to keep moving forward until finally Venus overtakes Juno. And I think when Venus overtakes Juno is where we're actually going to find the clarity around whether or not we stay in these commitments. So I actually think that it will be around the 26th, 25th, 26th that we start to get real clarity on this. And keep in mind that we have the fall equinox on the 23rd of September, I believe. And that's actually a massive day astrologically, and I'll show you guys in a second. But I feel like that's a period of time where we're really going to have the clarity and the changes are really going to come in. And that's where we're going to know what we want. So if we look, we'll see Venus on September 26th overtakes Juno, and then she takes the lead again. And she basically stays within a couple degrees until she hits that 28-degree mark, which is where she's coming out of her post shadow. That's October 6th. And then October 7th, she's out of shadow. And then boom, she's October 8th. Depending on where you're in the world, she's now in Virgo. So we're going to go all the way back to September 14th and 15th, because those are two very important days. Okay, so here we're looking at September 14th or 15th. And so what we have is Juno and Venus together at 14 degrees of Leo, making a square over to Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. At the same time, we have this Sun in Taurus conjunct the moon. And so that is the new moon in Virgo that's going to happen. And we also finally, it doesn't show on this, but it's like right afterwards, we finally have Mercury go direct, like right afterwards. We also have Vesta at 0 degrees of Cancer, making a square over to Ceres at 29 degrees of Libra, but then right afterwards, Ceres moves to 0 degrees of Scorpio, and the two of them then form a trine within water signs. And at the same time, we have the two of them making a trine over to Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 2 degrees. So let's break this all down and figure out what's going on here. First of all, we have Venus and Juno together around 14 and 15 degrees, making this square over to Jupiter retrograde in Taurus at 15 degrees. So again, it's where in my life do I need for things to expand and it's not happening. Jupiter retrograde doesn't necessarily hold us back. That's more of Saturn's territory. But Jupiter retrograde is more like we don't feel the blessings in the same way. We can't expand in the same way. We can't move into our lives in the same way that we would when Jupiter's direct. So it is worth noting that Juno is the wife of Jupiter. And it's Juno that's moving forward with Venus. And it's Jupiter that's moving retrograde in Taurus. And so this is very much about Juno finding her empowerment and finding her sense of self so that she can leave behind this toxic situation. Because again, the South Node in Libra, and we have the North Node with Eris in Aries. And so there is this push and pull between wanting partnership, which is Libra, and wanting independence, which is Aries, and not being willing or not wanting to stay in toxic relationships anymore just so that we can be in partnership. And so this is Juno and Venus making a trine over to the North Node in Aries, and making a sextile over to the South Node in Libra. This doesn't need to be something that is hard to go through. This doesn't need to be something that is heavy to go through. You can leave behind the things that no longer serve your highest good, and it's not going to feel great. But when we finally have Jupiter going direct, and once we're finally moved out of all of this retrograde season, you will receive the blessings in your life. But you have to take the action to get to where you want to go. And it's about being self-empowered. And it's kind of interesting that we now have Ceres that's no longer involved in any of this. So we don't need somebody else to nurture us. We have it all within ourselves. That's Eris with the North Node, and that's Venus with Juno together in Leo. Everything we need is within us. All of the love that you need is within you. All of the guidance that you need is within you. All of the comfort and the safety and the feeling of connection that you need is within you. You have it all within you. But we've all kind of forgotten that, and we've been taught to look for it outside of ourselves, whether in material possessions or in other people, or in situations or our job, and finding value in all of these things outside of ourselves to prove our worth. Again, Leo. We don't need those things. Everything that we need is within us. That's Eris in the North Node in Aries. So this is very much about moving into that space of, as we move forward, finding that self-confidence to make empowered choices, to do the things that we love to do, and to put ourselves in situations where we are living from the heart and making the decisions that we need to make in order to be where we want to be in our lives, so that, let's say a year from now, you're living a life you absolutely love living, surrounded by people that you feel great around, and doing things that you enjoy, making money in ways that you want to be making it, not doing things you don't like anymore. I do purpose-based astrology, and this is the whole purpose of it, is to get us out of this space of doing things we don't like and feeling stuck. So at the same time, we have Vesta, which is our goddess of the hearth and the home. She's the sacred flame. She's what lets our soul on fire and how we keep that fire burning bright, moving into Cancer, making a trine, it will be, over to Sirius at 0 degrees of Scorpio. And then there's this trine between the three of them with Saturn in Pisces. Technically, trines are good things, but in this situation, it kind of feels like where we're going to be able to move forward and break free, because Saturn deals with restriction. It is, how do you nurture yourself deeply so that you can keep that fire burning within yourself? How do you keep yourself in a space where you are feeling safe and feeling protected and able to explore your creativity and able to explore the things that you need to do in order to take care of yourself and feel good, that maybe allow us to delve deeper into those parts of our emotional well-being and into our emotional selves? Because again, Sirius is like the goddess of nurturance, and she's in Scorpio, and Scorpio is deeply felt emotions. Scorpio is all the stuff that's kind of hiding under the covers that we don't really want to look at. And so this is nurturing those aspects of ourselves that are maybe deep and dark and we're not the most comfortable exploring or experiencing. And so it's learning how to nurture that part of ourselves, right? Love your shadow and making the decisions that are hard decisions, because you need to make those decisions. Because in making those decisions, you're actually empowering yourself and learning how to take care of yourself. And that's what this is all about, moving out of toxic situations so that you can live a life where you're fully empowered. So last but not least, we have the new moon in Virgo happening on that same day. That's also making a lovely little trine over to Uranus retrograde in Taurus. And so here we are on the beginning of a whole new cycle. And this is about helping us figure out these little steps that we can take to create a life that we really and truly love. And so again, that has to do with changes in our 3D reality. So what needs to change? How can you make things change? Because you're deserving and worthy of living a life that you absolutely love living. And so how do you get there? What do you need to do to get there? What changes do you need to make to get there? And they need to be little small changes. They don't need to be some massive change. And even if you tried to make a massive change, it probably wouldn't work out in your favor right now anyways, because we have Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. So there's a lot going on September 14th or 15th, depending on where you are in the world, that I think is going to be a major day for a lot of people. We'll probably feel it building around the 12th of September, maybe the 11th, and then we'll probably still feel it until maybe the 16th or 17th of September. So now that that's said and done, we're back at the original chart and we're looking at September 14th, and I'm just going to move ahead until the 21st, because I feel like this is going to be the beginning of a really big period of time, and it's going to last from the 21st until around the 24th. Now keep in mind that the 23rd is the fall equinox, so we're going to be feeling a lot of shifts around the 21st to the 24th, maybe even the 25th, because what we're moving towards is September 23rd. And I'm actually going to change the time on this, just so that you guys can see exactly what it is that I'm talking about, because September 23rd is the day of the fall equinox. And so that's when we have equal day and night. And that's when we see the sun leave Virgo and move into Libra. So this is the chart for the 23rd of September. And I think that it's going to be a really key day for everybody. Massive changes just in general, because we have the fall equinox. But then also, I think there's going to be a lot planetarily that's going on that we're going to feel the shift with. So we still have Venus and Juno sitting in very close proximity in Leo. We also have the asteroid Lilith, not the black moon Lilith, sitting opposite Chiron in Aries, that's retrograde. And we also have Mars in Libra, sitting opposite Chiron retrograde. We also have Black Moon Lilith at 29 degrees of Leo, trining over to Icarus at 26 degrees of Sag. And then we have Icarus making a trine over to the North Node and Eris in Aries. Now keep in mind that now we see Eris gone retrograde. And so we have a fire sign grand trine between those three. And we also have this sextile still happening between Pluto and Neptune, both of them retrograde. And we still have Ceres and Saturn and Vesta all making a grand water trine. And the only ones that aren't really interacting are Mercury, which is now direct, and Jupiter and Uranus. There's nothing that the three of those are really interacting with, but the rest are. So there's a lot going on the 23rd that I think we need to cover. And since this is a video about Venus having gone direct, I think that it's important to mention first Venus sitting at 18 degrees of Leo, very close conjunction still to Juno sitting at 19 degrees of Leo, and the two of them making this lovely little trine over to Chiron retrograde in Aries. This is all about healing all of the wounds where we don't feel good enough, where we don't feel deserving, where we don't feel confident, where we feel like we're not pretty enough, smart enough, nice enough, don't have enough money, don't have enough clout, don't have enough whatever it is in your life where you feel like you are not enough. This is about going within and healing the self. Aries, the self. Leo also has to do with ourself, but it's more to do with our self-confidence. This is all about finding our self-worth, finding those places within where we are good enough, and learning that we are deserving simply because we are deserving. You don't have to be or do anything in order to be worthy or deserving. You already are because you're here, period. And so at the same time, we have Mars and Lilith sitting at 17 and 18 degrees of Libra, sitting opposite Chiron in Aries retrograde, while at the same time having this lovely little sextile between Juno and Venus in Leo. So this is all about us finding that self-confidence to take the balanced action that we need to take in order to get to where we want to go. Now, it might be hard for us to take the action. We still feel like if we do these things, we're going to get rejected from whatever situation, because that's what Lilith has to deal with. And Lilith is also how we deal with our anger. Lilith is the dark side of us, and it is very vengeful and very angry. And meeting with Mars in Libra, before moving towards the South Node in Libra, which is ridding ourselves of toxic situations, this can be about how our anger manifests in unbalanced ways so that we can break free and we can heal the wounds that we need to heal around being rejected and feeling ostracized within our partnerships, so that we can do the things that we need to do to get to where we want to go, to have the partnerships that we want to have and have the situations in our lives that we want to have that are good for us and make us feel good about ourselves. And I know that was probably a lot to take in and on, but that's sort of what that is all about. Now, at the same time, we have Black Moon Lilith, which isn't the same thing as the asteroid Lilith. They are two separate things, although they do carry very similar meanings. So Black Moon Lilith isn't an actual celestial body. It's the point along the moon's orbit when it's actually farthest away from Earth. And so it's where we kind of feel like we're not included, where we kind of go our own way. We have our deepest repressed desires. It can also be the darkest parts of ourselves. It's where we value free will and where we're not willing to compromise. And so again, it's very interesting because we have Venus and Juno moving towards where Venus comes out of her post-shadow retrograde at 28 degrees, and that's where Black Moon Lilith is. And again, we have Juno here, which is, where are you compromising? Where are you tolerating things that you don't want to tolerate anymore? Where are you putting up with a bunch of bullshit that you don't need to be putting up with? So here we have Black Moon Lilith at 28 degrees of Leo, making a trine over to Icarus at 26 degrees of Sag. So the whole thing with Icarus is learning the risks that we can take and what our limits are. How far can we push before we break? How much can we do before we exhaust ourselves? And if you look up the story of the mythology of Icarus, right, flying too close to the sun and his wings melted, and so he didn't make it out of the maze. This is very much about us learning how to fly within our own limits so that we can break free of the own mazes that we've trapped ourselves in, and that the 3D reality has kind of trapped us in, or the matrix has trapped us in, right? How do we break free? What do we have to do? And we might even have to lean on those darker parts of ourselves to get to where we need to go. Because again, this is all about free will. And so we also see Icarus in Sagittarius at 26 degrees, making a trine over to Eris and the North Node in Aries. And now Eris is retrograde. So we might not have that same fighting spirit that we had before, but that's where we can kind of lean into the energy of Black Moon Lilith and use our free will, because Lilith is very much about not compromising, using your own free will. And so again, we can lean into the energy of both Icarus and Black Moon Lilith in order to align with our destined path. And keep in mind that there's also this aspect that they're all making to the South Node in Libra, leaving behind the things in our lives that no longer serve. And so it's a breaking free from this energy so that we can align with our destined path. And it's our own destined path. That's the other thing that needs to be remembered. Your destined path isn't the same as somebody else's destined path. We all have our own dreams and we all have our own things that we're working towards as per Pluto at 27 degrees of Capricorn retrograde, making this little sextile over to Neptune retrograde in Pisces. Again, the breaking down of our old world, the breaking down of our old ways of being, so that we can fulfill our destined paths for ourselves and live lives that we truly love living. I know it's a lot to kind of look at and take in, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that are probably feeling stuck and heavy and like they don't know what to do, but it's worth mentioning that there is a mass awakening that is happening within the collective and on this planet. And everything is shifting and changing. And we're all in this space of having what we knew be no longer, and having to take the risks that we need to take in order to fulfill our destiny. And for some people, it's going to be leaving behind a relationship. For some people, it's going to mean actually entering into relationship. But in that instance, it's all about entering in relationship where you are empowered, where you feel good about yourself, where you're not tolerating stuff and you're living up to your highest potential, and you're actually living a life that you love living with somebody who allows you to be exactly who you are. And so, yes, when we look at these charts, there is a reason for everything happening the way that it's happening. And so if on the 23rd, you find yourself in a space where either everything has reached this massive conclusion in your life and things are breaking apart, or they're coming together, just know that it's all part of the divine plan and everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to be happening in divine timing with Saturn and Pisces retrograde. All of the places in your life where you feel restricted, like you can't live into your dreams, that's just for now. It's all going to shift. So just trust the process. That was the point of the full moon in Pisces that we had. It was the end of karmic cycles that we have been trapped in. And then with the new moon in Virgo that we're going to have on the 13th of September, that's all about starting a whole new cycle. And with Venus now direct and Mercury going direct just after, it's all about us figuring stuff out. Just be patient, trust the process. I promise it does get better and it does get easier. We're just going through the ringer right now. So now that that's all said and done, we are back on the 23rd, and I'm just going to move forward to show you guys what we're sort of moving through and what we're building towards. So we see Juno and Venus meet again, and then we see Juno take the lead. We see them meet at 20 degrees on the 26th. Then we see them come off again with Juno taking the lead. And so here we are on the 28th, and this is where we see Venus overtake Juno in Leo. And so it feels like this is really where we're going to find the clarity of what the whole purpose of the Venus retrograde was for. Now keep in mind that it went retrograde at 28 degrees and went all the way back to 12 degrees, and that middle point is around the 20th degree. And so here we are at 21 degrees with Venus finally overtaking Juno. And it really feels like this is where we're going to have the bigger picture of what we're no longer willing to tolerate, where we're no longer willing to compromise, where we have the self-confidence to make the decisions and the choices that we need to make for our own highest good, even if other people don't like them, and where we're able to fully and completely step into ourselves and have that confidence to do the things that we want to do and need to do in order to get to where we need to go in our lives. Now, it's worth noting as well that the 29th, the next day, is the full moon in Aries. I feel like we're building towards this completion of really knowing who we are and having our values be really, really clear. Again, we're looking at Venus. And so we go back to the Venus and like what it represents and the symbolism behind it, right? So it's issues of what we desire, what we value, how we experience pleasure, the desire to love and be loved, not settling for things that we don't want, knowing what and who we like and don't like, and the desire for connection and satisfaction in our lives. And it feels like once we come off of that conjunction with Juno, that's where we'll have that breaking point of, nope, not willing to tolerate this anymore. Nope, not willing to compromise on that anymore. Because I know my worth. I know what I have to offer. I know my value. And I know that I am good enough. And with this full moon in Aries, where we have Chiron and Eris in the North Node, it's very much about, I know my self-worth. I know that I'm good enough. And not from a place of arrogance, knowing that you are good. Knowing that you are deserving simply because you're deserving, and you don't have to be or do anything different in order to have the situations in your life that you want to experience. And so now we are going to pull up the chart for the 29th, and I believe that the full moon is happening at 5:57 a.m. We're going to find out in a second. It is. So this is the full moon chart on the 29th of September. I'm not really going to go into it because I'll be doing a separate video for this, but I do think that it is worth mentioning and looking at because it is a prominent thing that's going to happen. But being that this is a video about Venus direct, I think it is worth mentioning, being that we're looking at Venus and Juno at 22 degrees of Leo. Again, Venus is in front of Juno now, and they're making this square to Uranus retrograde in Taurus, and it's exact on this day. So this is where we're going to hopefully be able to find the empowerment that we need to make the changes that we need to make. And at the same time, we have Venus and Juno making this trine over to Eris retrograde in Aries and the North Node in Aries. This is still all about finding that empowerment, that self-confidence, the self-worth, leaning into who we are, our individuality, everything that makes us uniquely us, so that we can heal those wounds around where we feel not good enough. Because this full moon in Aries, it heads over and it meets with Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. It's about where we feel not good enough, where we have all of our darkest wounds, all of the things about ourselves where we don't feel good enough because we're dealing with Chiron and Aries. It's also worth noting that we see the full moon sitting opposite Pallas and the sun in Libra, and they are conjunct. Now, Pallas is the goddess of wisdom and war, and so she is all about choosing your battles wisely. And so this full moon with this opposition is again about finding that empowerment within self to not settle for the things that we don't want and to step away from things in our lives that cause us to feel bad or imbalanced. At the same time, going on in the background, and this has been going on for a while and it will continue to do so, we have Pluto sitting at 27 degrees retrograde in Capricorn and Neptune retrograde at 26 degrees of Pisces. Figuring out where in our lives we are illusioned or disillusioned, where we are confused, what we're holding on to for reasons that we don't need to hold on to anymore, and making our dreams come true. And part of that is going to be watching the old world fall apart. And there's nothing to be afraid of with that. There's nothing to worry about with that, because it's all just part of the process of creating new earth where we are all able to step into who we are. And so don't exist in fear, exist in love. And so we also have Icarus sitting at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, making a square over to Neptune retrograde in Pisces. This is very much being in a space where it's hard to take risks because we don't exactly know if it's the right decision. Neptune retrograde in Pisces is very confusing. It's a period of time and a space where we don't really know what to believe, and we don't know the difference between reality and make-believe, and if something that we are seeing is a true intuitive hit or an insight, or if it's just a weird disillusionment or something that we're making up on our mind as a fantasy. And so this is very much that period of time where Icarus, with his wax wings, thought that he could just fly higher and higher and make it out of the maze. And because he was not really paying attention or confused or was just overwhelmed, that his wings melted and he crashed and burned. And again, we have this Mercury and Virgo that is helping us to exist in a space where we are able to decipher reality from fiction. Even though it's kind of sitting opposite Neptune in Pisces, it does have Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury, making a lovely little trine. So there can be flashes of insight. There can be moments of absolute crystal clarity. There can be moments where you are absolutely 100% sure and you know the difference between make-believe and what's real and what's not. So we're back on the Time Nomad app, and I'm just going to move forward to the 3rd of October because I feel like that's going to be one of the next days that we really need to pay attention to. So again, we're looking at October 3rd, and we can see that Venus has started to come off of her conjunction to Juno. So we're leaving all of that stuff behind. And at the same time, we see Mars meeting with the South Node and making a sextile over to Venus in Leo. This is where I feel a lot of masculines and those that identify as masculine and who have a very strong masculine energy within them are going to really feel the karmic situations that they're in and potentially start to break free from them. And they're going to have Venus there, the love of the confidence of that divine feminine energy to help them out and help them break free from the things that they need to break free from. At the same time, we have Mercury sitting at 27 degrees of Virgo, making a trine over to Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. And so this is where we really get the understanding of why the things in our lives that have fallen apart have done so in the way that they have, or where we get clarity on the things in our lives that need to end and need to fall away, and the steps that we need to take to get there. So let's say you're working a job that you absolutely hate and you want to quit and you don't want to be there anymore. And that would be like the Pluto and Capricorn, that this needs to go from my life because I'm not happy and it doesn't make me feel good. Then this Mercury in Virgo is going to help you understand all of the little steps that you need to take in order to end up in a much better position and leave that job. So that you don't just do something in the moment where you're like, fuck this, I'm out. I mean, you can do that. We do have Uranus sitting in Taurus retrograde, which is all about these surprising behaviors. But for the most part, it is very much about us having that understanding of, okay, before I leave this job, I might need to get another job. And so I need to do another resume and update my resume. And I need to get my references and I need to look for another job. And is the job that I'm doing now the job that I really love doing and I just hate the company? Or do I actually hate the job too? Like if you've been in retail forever and you're done with retail and you're over it, do you really want to go get another job in retail just so that you have a job? Because that's part of the old world and the old life that you have that needs to go as we move into the future. And you can't live this Venus and Leo, a life that you love living if you're doing things you don't like doing. And so part of this retrograde happened to help us build that confidence again to find the things that we value. I don't value this job doing this thing that I don't like doing anymore. And I don't want to do it anymore. And I know that I can do something else. I know that I'm good enough to do something else. Not from a place of arrogance, from a place of knowing my value and my worth. Again, this Eris and the North Node in Aries. I know my worth. I know that I am good enough. I know that I can have a job that I love. And I know that I can leave this thing that I don't like anymore to go do something better. And so it's having that confidence, Venus and Leo, to leave these things behind. And at the same time, we have the Sun in Libra coming off of a conjunction with Pallas in Libra, which is the goddess of wisdom and war. And so again, it's choosing your battles wisely. It's worth noting that we do have this like pack of celestial bodies sitting in Libra with the South Node. And so this is big time about leaving toxic situations behind and doing things that might not seem fair, because that's what Libra is all about, fairness and justice and balance. And with the South Node in Libra, that's what we need to leave behind. And so this is all about finding the empowerment that you need in order to take the actions that you need to take for yourself to step into your destined path. At the same time, we have Venus at 25 degrees of Leo sitting quincunx or in conjunct to Neptune at 25 degrees of Pisces. Now it's worth mentioning that Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. This in conjunction between the two of them is a really uncomfortable space for them to be in. It's almost like they don't understand each other and they don't really even know like what to do at this point. So in those moments of confusion where you are feeling stuck and lost and confused and disillusioned and like you can't see a way out and you don't know what to do, the best thing I can suggest is to just raise your vibration, move into that space of heart-centered living. And there's an easy way to do that. And it's just to think about the things that make you happy or make you feel good. The simple little things. Focus on those. And every time that you focus on those things, you raise your vibration because you're existing in that space of like, oh, I just love this so much. And when we exist in that space of really feeling that love we have for our lives and the things that we're experiencing and existing in, we then can center into that space of heart-centered living. And it almost comes on like a no-brainer. The confusion kind of goes because we know it feels good. And in doing that, you will shift your outer reality because your inner reality will have shifted. And so now we're back on the app, and I'm just going to move ahead to the 7th because there isn't really much that happens between the 3rd and the 7th where Venus is concerned. And so if we notice, Venus is now at 28 degrees of Leo, and that means she's basically done her post-shadow phase. And we can all kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Granted, there are still a bunch of planets retrograde, and so we are still going to be feeling quite a bit of the funk, but Venus is off of her post-shadow. And so now things will potentially get a little bit lighter. And so here we are on the 8th, and we see Venus sitting at 29 degrees of Leo over to Icarus at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. And so I think that this is a really important point because it's an anaretic degree. And the anaretic degrees to me are sort of like these points of pressure. And the best way that I can explain them is think about when you've been studying for an exam and you know that exam is coming. And you've crammed and you've crammed and you've crammed as much as you can. And now it's the night before the exam, and there's all this stuff that you didn't realize that you hadn't learned yet, and you got to cram to get this all ready for the exam tomorrow. And so this is where Venus is gonna have to embody everything that she's learned being in Leo, and Icarus is gonna be in that space of I gotta take action, I gotta take some risks, I gotta get some stuff done. And at the same time, we have Mars in Libra at 27 degrees scoring over to Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 27 degrees. And so this is existing in a space where we are really having to take some action towards the things that we want in our lives, and to let the old shit go. Pluto in Capricorn, 27 degrees, let it go. Mars in Libra, what do I have to do to get to where I need to go? And maybe I don't have to be diplomatic anymore. So don't be surprised if around October 7th or 8th or 9th, you start to see a lot of people doing a lot of things that they wouldn't normally do, or taking action towards their dreams, because we're sitting here looking at Venus finally out of post-shadow, finally done with all of the retrograde energies between the pre-shadow, retrograde, post-shadow, going direct, all of that. She's finally done. And here she is at 29 degrees of Leo, making this lovely trine to Icarus at 29 degrees. Again, I say, there is a purpose to everything. And when we know what's going on, we can prepare because we know what to expect. So this was part of the whole purpose, was getting us to that place where we're brave enough and confident enough to take the risks that we need to take, even if they're out of the ordinary or out of character, because we finally have the confidence to do them. So we're back on the app, and we're just going to jump ahead to the 9th. And here we see Venus conjunct Black Moon Lilith at 0 degrees of Virgo. And I'm sure we're probably going to be feeling it already. But Venus is heading for an opposition to Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 1 degrees. But that is a whole other video. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully it helped. Hopefully it gave you guys a pretty good understanding of what Venus retrograde in Leo was for, as well as showed you guys what we can expect in the coming days and weeks as we go through Venus direct in Leo. I hope you're having a great day or evening wherever you are. My name is Starry Night Oracle, and I have been your astrologer for this video.